The man cowered in the corner of the room. His face was splattered with blood. His kneecaps were smashed. Tufts of his hair were scattered across the floor. Every muscle, every nerve screamed in pain. The man looked up. Looming over him was the devil, one of the Mafia's feared enforcers. The devil's lips curled into a smile as he pressed the trigger on the power drill. The whir sent shivers down the man's spine. The devil stepped forward. The drill hovered inches above the man, when suddenly the shrill ring of a phone pierced the tension. This isn't the plot of a Hollywood movie. This is real life. And in today's episode of the Infographic Show, we'll look at one of the Mafia's worst punishments, the power drill. We don't usually associate the Italian-American Mafia with the most extreme torture methods in organized crime. That accolade usually goes to Mexican cartels, drug trafficking outfits that showcase their savagery in videos posted on social media. The notorious Los Zetas, an unhinged organization, is known as one of the more violent and ruthless cartels in the country. Their bloodthirsty journey through crime began in 1997, when 31 highly trained maniacs from the Mexican Army's elite airborne special forces group decided crime pays better than the military. With military discipline and extreme prejudice, Los Zetas rained hell down on Mexico, at times engaging in mass beheadings. The coup de grace often followed barbaric torture devised by the group's hitman unit, the Tropa del Infierno, or Hell Troop. Perhaps the peak of their brutality took place in 2010, when men from Los Zetas kidnapped 122 passengers from a bus traveling near the U.S. border and forced some of the occupants to fight to the death with sledgehammers. Amnesty International once said, "Torture in Mexico is out of control." It sure was, but we can't find any instances in which Los Zetas tortured and killed with power drills, which we have to admit surprised us. Were any of the Mexican cartels partial to Bosch brutality, Black & Decker barbarism, the kind of cordless cruelty that we're about to describe in the intro before that phone rudely rang? Look no further than the famous case of DEA agent Enrique Kiki Camarena, who in 1985, after being just a bit too good at his job, was abducted along with his pilot by the Guadalajara cartel and endured 30 hours of top-drawer torture. His autopsy showed that when he passed out, a doctor had given him shots of adrenaline. These guys were some very sick men. His nose, jaw, cheekbones, and windpipe had been crushed. His ribs had been broken, he'd been electrocuted, and there was a hole that had been drilled into his head. So yes, the cartels obviously would use power drills when it's convenient. Let's now mine some deeper depths of drilling depravity before we return to the story of our Mafia devil. One of the most recent cases of body drilling featured the Aryan Brotherhood of Texas and one of its leaders known as Texas Mike. In 2016, Mike said $600 had gone missing from his wallet, and what better way to settle a financial dispute than with a cordless power drill? The victim, 36-year-old Alberto Gonzalez, was accused of taking the money. He was first beaten with a hammer, cut with a machete, and only then did Mike pull out his prized power drill. What's kind of surprising about this case is Mike had only originally given Gonzalez a light beating. Gonzalez then had agreed he'd pay the money off by mowing Mike's lawn for a month or two, something that sounds completely reasonable. The two men then celebrated with a few beers and some high-quality crystal methamphetamine, pre-procured, of course, by Mike. Ice was his forte, but it seems it could negatively affect his moods. So at some point during their festive merrymaking, as can happen when you mix booze with strong stimulants and an unstable mind, Mike had a swift and compelling change of judgment. Soon he and a buddy were burning Gonzalez with a hot spoon, but not before they smashed a bottle over his head and hit him with a hammer. As these things tend to go, the torturers then agreed that it wouldn't be in their best interests for this escalation to be made public, so they decided to finish Gonzalez off. Mike disappeared for a minute and returned to the room with a power drill, whereby he proceeded to drill holes in Gonzalez's stomach, chest, and finally 4 holes in his head. As for Mike, he'll now spend his remaining days in prison, where he'll have plenty of time to weigh the pros of détente against the cons of escalation. Unsurprisingly, there have been drill aficionados who fall into the maniac category of killer, such as the man who murdered the 14-year-old girl from Cleveland, Ohio, Aliana DeFries. She was grabbed getting off a bus in 2017 by lifelong violent criminal Christopher Whitaker. He subsequently engaged in unspeakable acts of sadism with various tools, including a Black & Decker drill and a Phillips head screwdriver, in a torture routine that lasted several hours. Whitaker was later sentenced to death. It's not only in the US where power drills have become torture devices. In 2020, in the Netherlands, a man was robbed in his house. The perpetrator, as part of a long torture routine, drilled 7 holes in the man's leg and foot. The victim was the owner of a Bitcoin trading company that seems to have lost a lot of people a lot of money. Evidently, some quite serious people. We don't need to tell you that having your leg or foot drilled would be excruciatingly painful. The initial stabbing pain as the drill pierces the skin would be followed by a much more profound agony as the drill makes its way to the bone. The pain would give way to psychological shock, adrenaline would take over, rinse and repeat until the victim passes out. It's exactly how men detained at the Jamiat police station in Iraq would have felt when Iraqi militia trained by the British tortured and killed at least 2 men who were found with drill holes in their arms, legs, and skulls. U.S. troops also found a chamber in Baghdad where 173 starving and tortured prisoners were discovered, many with drill holes in their body. Sticking with Iraq, the WikiLeaks files told us the notorious Special Commando Police, Wolf Brigade, gladly took men from U.S. troops and proceeded to torture them, often with electric drills. This brings us back to the start and the story of the Mafia assassin known as the Devil. His real name was John Vasey, who in the 1990s was a hitman and enforcer for the Philadelphia mob. Born to a mother and a father addicted to drugs, John didn't exactly get the best start in his life. He gained a reputation for fighting and was soon breaking heads for the Philadelphia crime boss, the Siciliano-born John Stanfa. Stanfa was engaged in a bloody war with the up-and-coming Joey Merlino. John was one of the men who did Stanfa's bidding, once almost killing Merlino in a drive-by shooting which ended the life of Merlino's top lieutenant, Michael Ciancaglini. John later said his kill list had 25 to 35 names on it. For the first hit, Stanfa had promised him $10,000. Stanfa was an unreliable mafia boss. He didn't pay John the money for the jobs. John complained, and before you could say cement shoes, John's older brother Billy, who was not a gangster, had been informed by local mobsters that Stanfa was planning to have John knocked off. "You're gonna get killed," Billy told him. "You're my brother. I don't want to see you die." Billy convinced John that his only way to survive was to become a rat and turn Stanfa in. Before John had time to weigh this up, he found himself walking into an apartment building with 2 mob guys that he thought were trusted colleagues, only to find the entire room was covered in plastic sheeting. John was shot 3 times in the head and once in the chest. Now he was angry. He took a knife from one of the men, stabbed him, and fought his way out of the building. He later said, "They should have had a better gun." John then did what any self-respecting man would do and planned to torture and murder every man who was after him. One of them was the mob associate Joe Fudge, who had been bragging around town that he'd been the one to bring down John Vasey. John was under house arrest at the time. He found a way to persuade Fudge to visit him at his house, where it just so happened John was waiting for a call from his parole officer. As soon as Fudge walked in, John looked at him and said, "So, you want to kill me?" John had a power drill in his hands connected to a 50-foot cable, and he wasn't doing any repairs that day. First, he smashed Fudge's knees with a baseball bat. As Fudge was bellowing in pain, John put the drill bit into his hair and turned on the drill, rendering Fudge a much balder man. He then started inserting the drill into Fudge's thighs. And that's when the phone rang. With the drill in one hand, John picked up the receiver. It was an automated call from the probation office asking him to reel off some of the American states to prove it wasn't a recording answering the phone. "Pennsylvania, New Jersey, Delaware," said John. In the background, Fudge was screaming as John's drill bored holes into him. John hung up and proceeded to drill into Fudge's elbows. Howling in pain, Fudge could barely believe his eyes when John started drilling into his knees. To John's utter dismay, the drill bit snapped. But he'd made his point. John handed Fudge the gun and told him, "Go ahead and shoot me." Fudge, now trembling like a frightened puppy, did nothing, to which John said, "The devil ain't gonna die." He threw Fudge out into the street. The next day, John's parole officer was unpleasantly surprised when he listened to the phone call recording and heard screaming to the sound of something buzzing. "What's all that noise in the background?" the officer asked John when he called, to which John replied it was just his wife enjoying the electric sex toy he bought her. Sadly, Stanfa's men got to Billy, murdering him in an ambush. John's immediate plan was to kill them all and, in his own words, to, quote, "inject their wives with AIDS." Instead, he took to the stand, spilling the truth about Stanfa and the mob. Stanfa received 5 consecutive life terms. 30 men in total were given prison sentences. Vasey, as part of his plea agreement, was sentenced to 10 years. As for John's drilling days, decades later he admitted, "I was pretty evil, and I ain't gonna try to say I wasn't." Now you need to watch Most Brutal Torture Methods by Mexican Cartels, or have a look at how the Great Mafia War killed thousands.